Hello, everybody. It's time for another episode of Mondays with Mundy, and that's me, Jim Mundy, the historian for the Unique Legacy Foundation. So a week ago, the first week of June, I spent in Newport, Rhode Island on the Newport Summer School, sponsored by the Victorian Society in America. So yeah, I got to spend a week in Newport looking at architecture. Surprise, surprise, right? But what was surprising, I think will be surprising almost everybody, is the fact that, when we think about Newport and the Gilded Age, and why not, that's what it's famous for, we think of the great houses built for the Vanderbilt families by Richard Mar's son, so the Breakers and the Marble House. But there are a surprising number of houses in Newport that were designed for Union League families and designed by a Union League architect, Horace Trumbauer. So I thought we'd take a look at those houses, if that's okay with you. So this will be at least a two-part series. So the first part was we're going to talk about two houses, specifically one called Clarendon Court, the second one Miramar. And to do that, we need a PowerPoint. So let me share my screen. And there it is. And slideshow. Okay, come on. Over we go. And here we are. All right. So let's get started. So this is Newport. Now, Newport is on Aquidneck Island, which actually is broken into three different sections. Newport's at the very southern end of the island. And here we have a diagram showing some of the more famous houses. And of course, these houses, the houses we're talking about, are not, unfortunately. But if you look at that road that starts at the Toro Synagogue at the very top and goes down to the very bottom on the right-hand side. So from numbers 3 to 2, that's called Bellevue Avenue. That is the street with all of the great houses on it, including the Breakers and the Marble House. At least you get to the Breakers off of Bellevue. But that's where houses are located, just below the number 2 at the very bottom of your screen. So that gives you some geographical idea about where these houses are located. All right. Now, and again, we talked about Richard Mar's hunt. I'm guessing that most of you in the audience have been to Newport to see these houses. They're worth seeing just because they're fantastic houses. So Richard Mar's hunt died in 1895, and with him went that style of kind of over-the-top architecture and over-the-top interiors and things like that. And Hunt's natural successor was Horace Trumbauer. But in between, in 1897, the American author Edith Wharton, and you're all familiar with Edith Wharton, wrote a book with an architect named Ogden Codman Jr., and it was called The Decoration of Houses. And their point was very plain and simple. Simple is better. You don't need houses jammed full of oversized furniture, oversized tables, all this greenery and stuff like that. Keep it simple. And that's what happened after that. And so the houses that Trumbauer designed are going to have relatively simple interiors compared to things that you would find in the Breakers and the Marble House, for example. So just a heads up there as well. Okie doke. All right, let's get started. So this is called Clarendon Court, but originally it was called Clarendon Court, Claradon Court, because this house was commissioned by Edward Collins Knight Jr., a member we've heard about in the past, good and bad. His first wife was Clara Knight, and so he named this Clarendon Court originally after his first wife. And this is the oceanside house that we see right here. So we'll scroll down and we'll take a look at the Bellevue Avenue facade. Now, originally the plot of ground itself was only 2 acres on Bellevue Avenue, but quickly Knight was able to purchase the 6 acres between Bellevue Avenue and the ocean, and that's what we have today. Now, as we know, Horace Trumbauer was most famous for designing houses that his clients wanted, which tended to be reproductions of other houses. Trumbauer was never accused of being original, unfortunately, for better or for worse. So here we have a house that was built in the 18th century called the Hedworth House, built for John Hedworth in Chesterless Street, Durham, England, by the Anglo-Scottish architect Colin Campbell. And ironically, as that house was being torn down in 1903 and 1904, this house was being erected in its place, so to speak. So it's a wonderfully simple house. It's Palladian all the way, symmetrical. It just doesn't get any better than this. And this is considered Trumbauer's best reproduction of an original house itself. So And you can see why. I mean, it's just magnificent. Now, it's a relatively small house, though, for Newport houses, but that's not bad. So here we go. So this is the house from Bellevue. That's Bellevue Avenue along the bottom of the screen there, and you can see the plot of ground that it sits on. It ends out to the ocean. And here we have it from the opposite side. So that grass, that spit of grass into the right-hand corner is also part of Clarendon Court's property. And if you look at the far left-hand side, you see a house there just on the edge of the screen, and that is Miramar, which is the second house we'll be talking about shortly. All right. Now, of course, the house was meant to be used for entertainment, because that's what Newport was all about. But the Knights quickly discovered that it wasn't quite big enough, and so they brought Trumbauer back in 1908, and he added 2 additional wings. So the house went basically from a U shape to an H shape. So if you look at the diagram, the floor plan in the upper right-hand corner, you can see both the right-hand side. So you have the library and the breakfast loggia. They were added by Trumbauer in 1908, and then he connected them via a loggia in between. And that's how the house stands today. All right. Now, again, very simple interiors at this time. And in the lower right-hand corner, we have an example of the living room, if you will. And it is basically full of Chippendale furniture. So maybe, you know, so quite different from what you find at the Breakers in the Marble House, which was just loaded with oversized furniture themselves. And you can see just very simple decorating, the cornicing, the mantle, the overmantle, all very simple here. And here we have the entrance hall. So the door is behind us. We're looking into the house itself, but you can see a door behind the staircase. And again, nothing more complicated than 2 simple Chippendale chairs. This is the entrance hall in the later 20th century. You can see how then owners added some stuff to it, including those, you know, Rococo gilded mirror on the wall, with the table beneath and the chairs, but of course the simplicity of the tall case clock and the sculpture. And then this is the entrance hall as it most recently looked before it was repurchased in 2021. And if you look through the door, you can see the ocean itself. So, and then we look to the right and you walk in and there's the dining room. So let's go there. So this is the dining room in its most recent iteration. And you'll see how, again, in here, the mantle and the overmantle are even simpler than they were originally in 1912, because we're about to see a 1912 photograph of this room itself. You can see it's very functional, very plain, very simple. And this is it. This is the Knights' dining room. And you can see how the mantle is a little bigger, the overmantle is still a mirror, but again, back to the Chippendale style furniture. So, you know, absolutely acceptable furniture and decorating for the time period. The large area rug. Living room, again, full of Chippendale, but very simple again. Nothing extravagant at all in this house at that point in time. And it's gotten even simpler over the years. This is the living room's most recent iteration. And again, simple mantle, over mantle, just a simple mirror, hardly any furniture, but functional at the same time. And then we have the library, which is a little more stuffed with stuff, if you will, because that's what you do in libraries. So, but even then, though, it's still a very simple house. And it's the Clarendon Court changed names because in 1928, Clara died, and the house was purchased by Colonel William and Mrs. Hayward, and they changed the name to Clarendon Court, the one that has right now, after one of Charles I's prime ministers in England. All right, so, but the house itself has been famous for other things over time. Let's take a look at what they might be. And before we do that, well, here we have, this is one of the 1908 Trumbauer editions. So this was the breakfast room, if you will, with these wonderful French lattices, and there's just light pouring in. What a great place to have breakfast, isn't it? If only. So we talked about the house being used for other things. 1956, the film High Society was actually filmed in Clarendon Court. Quite a cast there as well. And not surprisingly, Grace Kelly's character was named Tracy Lord, because it was written by the same author. And we know Tracy Lord because she appeared in the Philadelphia Story that was filmed in another Trumbauer League member house called Hertwausen in Villanova. But most famously, Clarendon Court hit the news because in 1980, we have the von Bülows. Klaus von Bülow on the left, his wife, Martha Sonny, offered von Bülow on the right, and she was found unconscious on Christmas in 1980. And it was thought that it wasn't accidental, but things got better. And then a year later, it happened again at Christmas time, and now everybody's pointing their fingers at the husband. He was considered guilty before the trial, but the trial itself basically acquitted him of any charges, and the result was that he had to leave the house, and that was the end of that. So the house has had a few owners ever since. The most recent sale of the house was in September of 2021, and Clarendon Court sold for $30 million. And to this day, it is the most expensive house ever purchased in Rhode Island, but still a private house. It was purchased by an investment banker, I believe, in Manhattan, whose name I was not able to find. So anyway, so that's Clarendon Court. If you get to go there now, because it's private, you can't get in there, but you can at least look through the gate on Bellevue Avenue, and it's quite a stunning house. So here's Miramar, the second of two houses. And not surprisingly, it's much, much bigger because, not surprisingly, it was built by a different family that built big houses. It's the Widners family, all right? So we're back to the Widners. Now, we've talked about Linwood Hall in the past, that great estate of theirs in Elkins Park on Ashbourne Road, which, by the way, was just purchased by a nonprofit and will be hopefully restored over the next number of years. But same family. So, well, P.A.B. Widener, the great patriarch of the family, built Linwood Hall, and his son George and his wife Eleanor Elkins Widener built Miramar. So the plans were done by late 1911, early 1912. The contracts were signed, and the work begins. And then George, Eleanor, and their son Harry take that fatal trip on the Titanic from France to New York. And George and Harry were lost at sea. Eleanor survived, and when she got back, she decided to keep building the house itself. So it was finished officially in 1914, but not officially open until 1915 with a grand party held by Eleanor Elkins Widener. And that's what we see here today. So this is what it looked like in the early 20th century, just magnificent. And this is the Bellevue Avenue side again, because it was the garden was created along Bellevue Avenue, designed by Jacques Rivera, whom the Elkins really made famous by first hiring and design the gardens at Linwood Hall. And he did it again here at Miramar. And shortly afterwards, he would go to Philadelphia and design, or landscape, if you will, the Ben Franklin Parkway. So take a look here. You have these wonderful round arched windows with these volute or bracket keystones separated by a cornice to the second floor, where we have these wonderful engraved panels separating the windows. Let's take a look some more. So here we have, so there you see Bellevue Avenue on the left-hand side with a wonderful landscaping done by Rivera. And off to the right, we have the ocean itself. Again, an H-style plan house. All right, this is what it looks like today. You can see how all the landscaping has gone. There's Bellevue Avenue again from the lower left-hand corner up to the right. The original carriage house / garage on the left-hand side was designed to look like an orangery so that it didn't look like a service wing. But even the garden there has been replaced by the tennis courts. And knowing today, they're probably pickleball. And here we have it from the ocean side. And this is what it looked like in the most recent realtor's ad, because this house also sold in September of 2021, but for only $27 million. We'll get to that at the end. So here's the plan. Again, a very, very abbreviated, simple H plan itself. And of course, the salon in the center, up on the upper level, you can see the salon there. That became the great entertaining room for Eleanor Elkins Widener. This is the entrance hall. Beautiful cayenne stone from France, both on the walls, the floor, entrance hall, entrance stairway. You can see the stairway there in the back right-hand corner as it goes up, just simplicity itself. And if you look at the left-hand photograph over the pier table, I'll call it, you have the flowers, you have the sconce, and above that on the wall, you have that wonderful swag pattern. So the next time you're in the Union Lake, go to the second floor of the 15th Street building and look over the doors of the Library Lounge and the Lincoln Memorial, and you'll see the swag pattern. So architecture repeats itself. Not 100%, but it still repeats itself. So, and here we have Eleanor's great salon, where she would have her great soirees for the opening of tennis season, because after Newport became known for tennis and things like that. So this is what it looked like when it opened, and this is what it looks like today. So all that wonderful gilt boiserie is there from the original house, from the original appearance, 19. This house opened 1915, and it's still there, although the furniture itself has obviously changed in style from Louis XVI to something more modern. What the heck? That's what owners get to do with it. So, but the house itself was really designed by another Parisian firm done by Andre Carpane. Here we have the entrance hall. Again, very simple, looking down on it. It's the epitome of simplicity. Here we have, so there you see the stairwell off to the right. This is the entrance hall itself. There's the swag above a different table, but nonetheless a swag altogether. But how plain it's just it's just magnificent. Here we have the dining room, and much of this is left over from the original house itself, as you can see, because on the left-hand wall you have a permanently installed marble buffet or break front, if you will, and above it you have a wonderful tapestry from Beauvais in France, and it depicts the life and adventures of Don Quixote. As that's what you did with walls, you covered them in tapestries, and it just doesn't get any better than this. Now, Miramar has had its own checkered history because after, after George goes down the Titanic, Eleanor remarries William Hamilton Rice, who's a professor at Harvard, and after he died, she would live in there for a number of years, and then when she died, she willed it to her two children from George. So George Jr. and Eleanor Dixon inherit the house. Neither wanted the house, so they bequeathed it to the Episcopal Diocese of Rhode Island, who used it as a retreat campus for a while. They then sold it, and it became a girls' school called the Miramar Girls' School, not surprisingly. And then when that closed in 1970, it was sold to a private owner. Now, when it sold in 1970, it was sold for $75,000. Eleanor Elkins Widener spent $1.5 million between 1912 and 1915 to build and decorate the house. So it goes to show you how Newport houses had declined in both value and appeal over the years. But nonetheless, so this house went through a series of private owners as well, and it was purchased in September 2021, ironically by a Philadelphia area fellow named Stephen Schwartzman, who runs the BlackRock Financial Management Company. And so he is the current owner. It is under reconstruction as we speak, because when I went to take a photograph of it, there was nothing but scaffolding. So I thought, nothing to see. So, but hopefully by the end of the summer, I can imagine it'll be done. So on that note, if you can't get to Newport, you can read about these books in this about these houses in this wonderful book called American Splendor, the residential architect Horace Trumbauer. So there's more than just the Newport houses in there as well, but definitely a book you want to have in your library if you can do it. So that's our first incursion into Newport with Union League members and their houses. Clarendon Court for Edward Collins Knight, and then we had Miramar for George Widener and Eleanor Elkins Widener. So thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. I hope you found this interesting enough to the point to go there and see them yourselves. So stay tuned. In 2 weeks, we'll see what comes up next. So thank you, everybody. We appreciate your patronage for watching and your support over the years as we are in our 4th year, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. Goodbye.